Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, I'm ranking all of my tarot, oracle and reading cards. Hopefully I can figure out some patterns in the things that I like about certain decks and the things that I don't like about others so that I can make more informed purchases in the future, and perhaps it will inspire you to do the same. Maybe you'll find a deck that you really like, maybe you'll be inspired to sort out your own collection. Either way, I hope this is an enjoyable video. By no means do I have a massive card collection. Some people have thousands upon thousands of decks. I have between 30 and 35 that I will use for varying different things. Some will be used in altar spaces and spell work as a way of focusing my intention. Others will be used on personal readings or readings for other people. But it is enough of a collection for me to have favourites and ones that tend to stay on the shelf. This ranking is going to go from my least favourite decks to my favourite decks, and it's going to be based on a few different factors. The artwork, the energy of the deck, how well I connect to it, and how often I choose to pick it up and read from it. And ultimately, are those readings successful and accurate for me? So if there's a card deck that ends up at the bottom end of my collection, that doesn't mean that it's a bad card deck. It doesn't mean that it won't be successful for you. It just means that for me, there might be many reasons why I don't connect to it the same way I connect to others. Let me know as we're going through this video if you have any of these cards, your opinions on them, and also your favourite card decks in your collection. I would absolutely love to know. So with that being said, we're going to start right at the bottom of this list, and this was actually really difficult. There's so many reasons why some of these cards are towards the bottom, not all of them are the same, and it's kind of ranking things that don't really match up with one another, so I'm hoping that I'm going to be happy with my ranking, but we'll see. We'll see. At the very bottom of the list, it was a really hard choice, but I did settle on Saints and Mystics. This deck is beautiful, it just isn't for me. As you might expect, it's about saints and mystics, and the deck is split 50-50. And the artwork is really stunning, and that's what really drew me in, but the deck itself, I ended up never actually using. So it comes in this hard box that is magnetic, lovely. Inside you have a full colour guidebook, also incredibly useful. And then we get onto the cards. The cards themselves are really nicely sized, they're not too big, they're not too small, they're shiny as you can see, and the artwork is really lovely. However, straight away, I probably should have realised that this deck wasn't going to be 100% for me because I don't work with the saints. It is just not an aspect of the craft that I've ever felt particularly drawn to, so I've never really done it, and half of this deck is made up of saints, and then obviously the other half is made up of mystics. The other thing I didn't like that really threw me off and kind of messes with my readings is that the backs of the cards look different whether they are saints, they have this kind of pale stained glass effect, versus if they are mystics, which have this dark, almost nighttime effect to them. So it becomes really obvious when you're shuffling the cards which one you're going to get, because it shows it on the back, which I don't like. I like having cards that are all uniform, so you don't know which one you're going to pick, and it means that if you are shuffling or reading with your eyes open, you aren't going to be swayed on the card that you are pulling, especially if it's something that you want to work with for that day or a particular figure in history that you want to connect with. I do find it kind of difficult in that regard. The only other thing that I didn't like about this is entirely a personal preference. I wasn't sure how I felt about every single figure in this card deck being essentially beautified. Every single figure from history has been made more attractive than they probably would be, and it's almost got this Instagram model type feel about it. So probably the best two examples for this would be Isaac Newton and Saint Teresa, and I hope you see what I mean, but it kind of throws me off a little bit. So this one is Saint Teresa, and then this one is Isaac Newton. Do you see what I mean? They've been kind of Instagramified, and I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I do think that this deck could be really useful for some people, especially those that work with the saints or work with particularly important figures throughout history, especially magical and spiritual history. I do think that could be really useful, especially as focal points for meditations, for trance, for divination, these kind of things. But for me, I just don't reach for them, and so they've ended up at the very bottom. Next up, we have a card deck I've tried to work with, and I'm really struggling to wrap my head around it, and it is the Camelot Oracle. This one was really interesting. I saw it and I just knew that I had to get one for myself. It has an interesting, almost board game type feel to it. Hopefully you'll see what I mean when I open it. But in the end, I just couldn't vibe with it. It was just a little bit too complicated for me to want to get out regularly. And also I don't think that the actual paper inside would hold up to long-term reading. So inside you have a really big book that is sort of colour. It's in blue, which isn't full colour, but it is sort of coloured. And inside there's information about the different characters on all of the cards and a little bit of history about them and what they might mean in certain placements. And that's going to be really important. You then find a piece of paper, and this actually expands out and it essentially becomes a large map, which looks like this. And there's different placements on it where different cards sit. And where they sit, they mean something slightly different, which in theory sounds great. But this is made of paper. And anyone who's had a guidebook, for instance, that's really flimsy and made of paper, they will know that these kind of things start disintegrating at the seams really quickly. So I'm almost too nervous to repeatedly take this in and out to use it frequently. And then inside you have the cards, which I do actually really like. I've got nothing against the cards themselves. I think they're beautiful. They're split into two different varieties. So you have the picture cards, which have the different characters from Arthurian legend on them. And then on the other side, you have the images that were on the sheet of paper that tell you like the different paths. So you have the determined path, the resolute path, the wandering path, the deepening path, the turning path, and lastly, the honoured path. So these all relate to the sheet of paper, which I still don't really get. I've had this deck for years and I still don't really get it. And then the image cards are actually really interesting. If anyone has seen the Dark Crystal, that's kind of the feel I get off these cards. So you have the classic, King Arthur, Morgana, Gawain, and of course you have Merlin. But I'm just very confused by the system, and honestly more than anything it's a system that stops me from enjoying these cards. What I might actually do, because you know I hate edges, I might trim the white borders off the cards and then use them separately, because I think that could be really nice. I just don't get the system. I've tried so hard to get the system and I want to enjoy it. If anyone understands the system of these cards, please, please, please let me know, because I would love to use them more. It's just when I think about using them, I go, oh, but that seems like so much effort, and then I don't use it, which is not great. I want to use the cards that I have, so yeah. Let me know, but that is the reason why this one I just don't use that much. Next up, we have a really interesting deck with a really curious backstory. So this is the Tarot 3D, and it's actually, I'm not sure if you can see that, kind of a 3D style tarot card deck. Now, the backstory to this is I went on holiday to Gibraltar, and in Gibraltar there was this little tiny witchcraft shop, and the guy inside would do lots of tarot readings. He sold the most interesting items that I've never seen before, and I've never seen them since. And in the window was this 3D tarot deck. Now, he didn't have any in store, so when I got back home, I ordered myself a deck because I fell in love with them. I then went back to that shop the following year to find all evidence of its existence completely gone. If anyone has seen the movie Don't Think About It by Disney, I'm not sure if you will have watched that movie. It's a really obscure, like early 2000s Disney movie. And essentially this Halloween shop just appears, sells a girl a book, and then when she goes back to return it, the shop is gone. That's kind of the vibe I got with this shop. But this was the deck, and it is what I know of to be a royal tarot deck. So it only includes the major arcana, none of the minor arcana. The box is this kind of a horrible hard plastic that's really hard to open. You have a small little paper guidebook inside, which is really standard for this size of deck. And then you have the cards. So the back of the cards has a cross on it. And then the front of the cards, I hope you'll be able to see, they have this like 3D effect, and you can actually hear it on the cards. I really hope my microphone is picking that up, but they are so trippy. It's so weird, and it kind of hurts your eyes after a while. So just a few of the cards. Now, the main reason why I don't use this deck is mostly practicality. If I'm going to choose between using a full tarot deck and a royal tarot deck, I'm always going to choose a full tarot deck. That doesn't necessarily mean that royal tarot doesn't have its place in readings. It certainly does. It's great for archetypes and focus points and picking people out of significance within your life or within the lives of others. But for me, I like the well-roundedness of a full tarot set. And also, I'll be honest, the noise does kind of get to you. And also the box has the same kind of feel to it, and it's just very rigid plastic, and I often just bypass it. I actually, for a while, until I opened my tarot drawer, forgot that I even had these because they were hidden right at the back, and it's because I just don't reach for them that much. Next up, we have a deck that I love. I do really, really like this deck. It's just that I never ever use it, and the times that I have used it, I didn't get particularly good readings out of it myself. And that really is a personal thing. I know others do so many successful readings with this deck. It just isn't quite for me. And that is the Starman Tarot. Now, yes, this is exactly what you think it is. It is a David Bowie inspired tarot deck, which is so cool. I personally love David Bowie, so I was really happy to have this in my collection. It is for me a collector's piece. It just isn't something I use all that often. The box is inspired very clearly with David Bowie, which is just really nice to see as well. So it has an interesting pop top, so it like all opens this way, which you don't see that often. It has a guidebook at the front, which is a super slim guidebook that isn't in colour, so there's lots of different languages inside. There are no pictures of any of the cards, which is one of the reasons why I don't use it that much. It can be really hard to match the card to the specific meaning because the cards are, how do I best describe this? They are trippy, very, very trippy. So the back of the cards has this interesting pink design on them. They're super duper shiny. They're dead thin. The cards are so narrow but really long. And then the cards themselves are interesting. I think interesting is probably about as accurate as I can get. They are a really interesting deck of cards. The artwork just doesn't do anything for me. Some people are really going to like it. Some people are just not going to vibe with it. I got it as a collector's piece, not so much to use. I have used it, and I like it more than some of the other decks because it does have that kind of sentimental, it is a David Bowie deck feeling to it, but from a practical perspective, I simply don't use them that much. Next up, we have the Halloween Oracle, and I love Halloween. Halloween is my favourite time of year, whether I'm celebrating Samhain or whether I'm enjoying the spooky season, watching Halloween movies, I just love Halloween. And I got this deck specifically for my love of Halloween. There's a few reasons though why I don't use it that often. The first reason is this. The cards are just loose inside the box, and so when you travel with them or whether you take them out or anything, they're just flopping around a box that's just too big for them. I feel like they should have chosen one of two things. Either make the guidebook smaller so it's the same size as the cards and then have the deck box fit the cards, or make the cards bigger so they match the guidebook. I just feel like this doesn't work. There is a guidebook inside, which is quite small because there's not that many cards, and they do have pictures of all of the cards. They aren't in color, but that isn't too much of a problem for this deck. The cards themselves are really interesting. They all surround the Halloween season, so I'll show you a few of my favorites. But there's always a reason why I don't use them, and it's because for me, I can't really read from them. A lot of the symbolism is really similar. A lot of the artwork is also pretty similar. So the best example for me is the use of skulls. There's a lot of skulls in this deck, and not necessarily in a way that makes it easy for me to connect with the meaning of the cards deeper. So I'm just going to pull a few of the skull ones out. There's quite a lot of them. So these four are kind of the best examples for this. It's always the same skull, it's always the same kind of imagery, and I get it, it's a Halloween deck. It's just if you want something for reading and not just symbolism, maybe this isn't the best. So you have a skull with a pomegranate, you have a skull with flowers on it, like drawn on it. You then have a skull, just a skull, and then you have a skull with a candle on it. For me, I find that there just isn't enough variety in the deck for me to get much use out of reading them. So while I will often put them out for Samhain, I'll often put them out for the Halloween season, I'm using them mostly for the decoration of their artwork rather than reading the cards themselves, which if anything is the reason you would get a deck of reading cards, which is why they're quite low on this list, but I have used them more than some of the others. I can, however, not put the lid on it again. There we go. Next up, we have an infamous, for me anyway, deck of cards. This is the Fairy Tarot, and it is a royal tarot deck again, and already I can feel the reason why this is quite low on this list. It is not the lowest because I have used this deck a lot, but instantly, as soon as I hold this deck, I can tell exactly the reason why I stopped using this. So this was my first ever Royal Tarot deck, and I wanted to branch out into other forms of divination. I was using a lot of pendulums, a lot of runes. I wanted to try something else, and so I bought this deck online, and I was determined to make it work. Absolutely determined. And there were many reasons why it didn't work for me. I've had this deck handled by multiple different people, and every one of them has the exact same response. This deck isn't nice, and I can wholeheartedly agree. A quick trigger warning for blood, I will put a timestamp on the screen when we get past it, but I tried using this deck for months on end, and every time I would use it, I would get a nosebleed. And as soon as I would stop using the deck, the nosebleeds would stop. And the minute I stopped using that deck full stop, I have not had a nosebleed since. However, every time I pick up this deck, I'm experiencing it right now. It is not nice. I get this burning pain across the bridge of my nose. And it has always happened every time I hold this deck. And now I do not use this deck. I have it in my collection because as long as it is in its home and it is not being interacted with by people, it doesn't seem to have a problem. It is completely content. The deck also has remnants of that year when I was testing it a bunch, so I don't really want to give it to anyone or sell it to anyone. So yes, I will go through this deck really quickly because the less time I'm holding it, the better. You might be thinking, Hearth, why is it so high up on this list? And the reason is because I do really like the artwork, and it's nothing to do with the deck itself. It is more just the energy of this particular deck, not the cards. And when I did readings with this deck, the readings were really good. It is just all of the other physical problems I had with it. And I might be rushing this because the pain in my nose is getting worse. So you have a small little guidebook that comes with it. The cards themselves are really, really beautiful. Thank you, deck. I'm going to put you away now because I can feel it and it is unpleasant. So this is going back in here and it will safely return to its home. I know that I always get comments of people saying, why don't you just cleanse it? Why don't you just banish it? I have my reasons for not doing that, mostly because it will then simply attach to something else because I can just tell by what the feeling is that I'm getting off it. It is not something that is going to go quickly, easily, or lightly. I would much rather, and I would feel much happier with it being safely in a container that it enjoys, so that then it can just stay in there, be happy and content, and not interact with anyone that is not expecting to interact with it. At least I know that while it is in the deck, as long as I treat the deck with respect, as long as I keep it in a safe space, it will be fine. If I then remove it from that deck, I don't know what's going to happen. So that is the reason for that. Next up, we have another tarot deck. This is the Wheel of the Year Tarot. Now, this tarot deck is really beautiful. I just find that I don't reach for it that much, but when I do reach for it, I have phenomenal readings every time. For me, it's mostly the artwork that I don't really like. The cards themselves are phenomenal for reading from. So you have a small paper guidebook inside. As mentioned, it's pretty commonplace for smaller tarot decks. And then you have the cards. Now, I will say now, I have trimmed the edges of these cards, which means you can no longer see the meaning of the cards because I've cut it off, but I did that because I didn't like the border. So if you were to get these cards for yourselves, they would look different than these simply because I've cut all of the edges off. I'll link that video in the description box if it is something that you are curious about doing yourself. So the back of the cards looks like this. You can see where I've cut the edges off. I've taken off some of the back, but I don't really mind. And then the front of the cards is just, oh, it's beautiful. Some of them are reversed because I do reversal readings with this deck. So that is that deck. It's really beautiful. It is just the fact that the artwork for me is not my favorite, but when I do choose to use it, phenomenal readings every time. Next up, we have the Queen of the Moon Oracle. This is one of two moon-based oracle decks that I have. I also have the Moonology deck that is going to be coming up a little bit later. Inside, there is a small little guidebook, which is really useful. This one is also in color, which is great, though the cards are really small. The cards themselves, I like, but I just don't vibe with them that well for readings, which is why it is here on the list. There are other cards that I vibe with a lot more. These ones I mostly use as altar focus points, daily readings, that kind of thing. I won't typically do full readings with them. So yeah, this one's a quick one. It's a beautiful deck. It's just not one that I am particularly drawn to. I mostly keep it for sentimental value because sadly the lovely lady that I purchased these from has since passed, and so it does hold that sentimental value that some of the other decks perhaps don't, which is why it's placed so high on this list. Next up, we have all of the decks by Maya Toll. Now, that might sound like an odd addition to this list, but by a lot of the books by Maya Toll, there is included a set of cards, and I have a few different of their books. So I have the illustrated bestiary, the illustrated herbiary, the illustrated Christiary. That doesn't sound right. I will write it on the screen if that's not right, but I have those three. And inside each of them is a deck of cards, and they vary in size. So you have the larger size decks, and you also have the small ones that you pop out for yourself. And I do find that I use them fairly frequently because I enjoy the artwork, and I will add them onto altar spaces. Now, I can't remember exactly which ones these were from, so if I can remember them, I will put them on the screen, but I'll show you just a few examples from both of these decks. So this one I know is from one of the herb decks. It might be the illustrated herbiary, I'm not entirely sure. I use this one the most because I do enjoy working with plants, and you also get a book as well, like an actual book. These are just the addition to the book, not the other way around, which I think is great. The other set of cards are more about crystals, I think. Yes, crystals, which is interesting. You don't often see crystals being used in cards in this exact way. Next up, we have two decks, both by Kim Krans. Kim Krans is one of my favourite card illustrators. They actually illustrated the first tarot deck that I ever purchased, which is actually way at the top of this list. It's one of my favourites of all time. But I have two of their oracle decks that I find I don't use too often, and you will probably see why really quickly. So the first one is the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck. This is huge. Like, this takes up an entire drawer. just in the depth of one box, which is bananas to me. It makes them so difficult to store. They have this cover that you can just pull off. You then have the further box inside, which then has a massive guidebook inside that, which is followed by a circular box. It's like pass the parcel, honestly. And then inside that, you finally have the deck of cards, which are beautiful, but they're circular, which anyone who's tried to shuffle a circular deck will probably know it's not easy. There's also a lot of cards to try and shuffle, which is why I simply don't use them. If they were a little bit smaller in size, I don't think the volume of cards would be as bad. But when you've only got little hands, I can't actually hold all of the cards without some of them just falling on the floor. Exactly like that. I just can't do it. There's too many of them, which is the big problem with this deck. The back of them looks like a beautiful diamond, and then each one has got a number and it's got a bit of information about it. These cards are truly, truly beautiful. It's just, for me, there's too many negatives about them. I'll try to find one that really shows off the artwork because I don't necessarily think that any of those did, but this is a really colourful one that might show it a little bit better, would be this one. This is kind of the classic Kim Kranz artwork. They're really, really beautiful. If you want to read reversals, it's really hard because it's a circular deck. It's really hard to know which way's up and which way's down. And I just find circles so hard to shuffle. If they were not in a circle, I would definitely use them far more than I do. It is just, circles make shuffling hard. And big decks are hard enough to shuffle as it is. Next up is also by Kim Kranz, and it is the Animal Spirit Oracle. And this box is holographic, like actually holographic, none of this like nonsense hollow, actually hollow. This one is higher than the other one because it is a rectangular deck. It's so much easier to shuffle, and I will use this one considerably more frequently than the last, so it's quite a big step up at this point. So the cover slides off to reveal the box, which then opens up to reveal a book, which then reveals another box, which is also holographic. Kim Kranz does put a lot of time and effort into the aesthetic of everything, and it is beautiful. And then inside you have the classic Kim Kranz artwork, and that is a much more manageable deck. It's a decent size, it's easy to shuffle, the cards slide over one another really easy. It's beautiful. The reason I don't use it that much is I will use these as single card draws. So if I need to have a specific animal spirit come into my life for that day, then I will use this deck. If I need to a little bit of an extra on a pre-existing reading using one of the decks further up in this list, I will pull one of these. Will I do an entire reading with this deck? No, which is why it isn't that high up this list. But the artwork is... it's really nice. What I like about this is that, one, the cards are so easy to shuffle, but also the animals are not just from one place, they're from everywhere. And also the animals are not just really obvious ones. It isn't just a butterfly, a snake, a spider, a cat, a fox. They have some really unusual ones, like you have beavers, oysters, turtles, foxes, bees, unicorns, bats. I'll be honest, the bat is one of my favourites. Look at it! It won't focus on it. Please, it's cute! There it is. Look how cute it is. I love bats though. I think bats have got such a bad reputation. So in that regard, beautiful deck. It's just that I don't do full readings with it. Next up is one of my newest decks. It is the Tarot of Sorceress, and it is beautiful. It has a black, gold, and white theme to it, and it's one of those decks that I reach for, and that is something that cannot be said for a lot of them in this list. This is a deck that I will reach for purposefully for readings. It does have its own little guidebook inside, but really it's the cards that sell it for me. They have just the most amazing style to them. It's exactly my kind of artwork, and so these I reach for. I find it's really easy to connect with the artwork on these, and so they are quite high on this list despite being new because I will actively reach for them. Also, look at that. That is the the brightest gold edging I have ever seen. You can even see the red light of my microphone. That is my microphone light. They are blindingly mirrored. They are absolutely stunning. So that is why these are so high despite being new. Next up, we have 3 decks by the same people. We have the Oracle of the Hidden Kingdom, the Wisdom of Merlin Oracle, and the Oracle of the Pagan Spirit. These are in an appropriate order for which ones I use least to most, but I will say now that these are no longer available to purchase. The creators of them are no longer printing them, so if you can find them secondhand, fantastic, but if you can't, you'll have to find something in a similar vein that probably has slightly different artwork. I do use these decks really frequently on altars, so if you've ever asked me a question about what a certain deck is, if I've not got back to you, it's probably more likely than not because it's one of these 3, and I don't want the creators of the decks to be hounded about making more if it isn't something they aren't able or wanting to do. So I will go over these really briefly because they are no longer available, at least I don't think they are. If they are, I will let you know on the screen. If there is nothing on the screen, it is because they are currently out of print. So first we have the Wisdom of the Hidden Kingdom. Next up, we have the Wisdom of Merlin. And then we have my favourite of the 3, the Oracle of the Pagan Spirit. With these cards, you might feel as though your vision is a little out of focus or your TV or phone is. It isn't, I promise. It's just the cards have this really interesting, trippy, kind of fuzzy appearance that I really enjoy. These cards I mostly use on altars, specifically the Oracle of the Pagan Spirit. This one I will use more than any other. Along a similar vein, we then have the Mists of Avalon. Now you'll likely have also seen these on altars. I do use them quite a lot, especially around Imbolg, because the Brigid card in this deck is my favourite of all Brigid cards. There is a small guidebook inside which is in colour, which is useful. And then the cards are small in number, but the artwork is stunning. So I don't use these massively for doing readings, but I do use them a lot for altar spaces, which is why they're so high, because I will actively reach for these on a regular, monthly or seasonal basis. The next 3 were actually incredibly close, so much so that I'm still not 100% set on my decision, but next up we have the Oracle of the Witch. A little bit like the Tarot of the Sorceress, these are very themed. They are red, black, and white themed, and they are stunningly beautiful. There is a little guidebook inside, which is incredibly useful, but really it's the cards that sell it for me. It's that same artwork that I really love, and that's what draws me to read from them time and time again. I can't get past this. Every time I open this deck, it amazes me. That is a red foil edge. Red foil, I've never seen red foil. Gold, silver, yes. Red, never. They're beautiful. So all of the cards have this very, very striking red, black and white design, but I really, really enjoy the style of the artwork, and I will come back to it time and time again. And there's just something about the style of it. I just really enjoy the representation of everything. I think I really like that the most of everything. I can look at all of the cards and I know what they're referring to. Like this one's a great example of it. This is number 23, Weather Magic. It's evocative, it's powerful, and that's the kind of artwork that I look for in a deck. It needs to be really punchy and powerful. And this would honestly be higher if I'd have had it for longer. I only got these back in May. I got them from Witchfest, and I really enjoy reading them, and perhaps in the future they may end up considerably higher in this list. It's just they are competing with decks that I've had for 10 plus years, so that makes it really hard to compete. Now I have to remember that I accidentally threw one of the cards from one of the Kim Kranz decks on the floor. I have to remember that that's there because otherwise I'm going to be like, where is my card? I'm missing a card. Where is it? The next one, another one of the hard fought ones. It was such a tough decision between this one and the Moonology deck, which is coming next. But this is the Green Witch Oracle, and this is stunning. I love this deck. It's beautiful. It's the exact same size as the previous two, so it has a small little guidebook inside. But what gets me about this is the fact that it is a plant-based oracle deck, but it isn't really fancy, hard to find plants. It's plants that we can regularly work with, connect with in kitchen witchcraft, green witchcraft. We can add them into food, we can add them into teas, we can add them into lotions and potions, and we can work with their spirits and energies as well. That's why I love this deck as much as I do. So this is what the cards look like. There's just something about a deck that focuses on the actual practical side of green witchcraft. It's not just mandrakes. It's not just difficult to procure items that you're never going to be able to find in your magical practice. They are things that you can find at your local grocery store, at your supermarket, in your garden. Peppermint and basil, pink rose, geranium, carrots. They're things that we can touch and feel and have a tangible interaction with. You can tell that this deck was made by someone who knows what they're talking about when it comes to green witchcraft, and I really enjoy it for adding onto additional readings. So I will draw one card, or I will do just a single daily draw, and that is something that I need to be connecting with deeper. Whether that is what that plant represents or whether it's the plant itself will depend on the plant and the circumstances, but this deck was really tempting to put it higher, but I had to put it here so that I didn't miss out on other decks later on. Next up, we have Moonology. Now, Moonology was not a deck of cards that I was expecting to end up in this list, but what happened was I put them in front of my computer on the basis that I should really use them more. And by putting them in a space where I could see them every day, I ended up using them every single day, and they started giving me really accurate readings. Now, the cards come with a small guidebook, as all of them do, and they each represent an aspect of kind of lunar cycles as well as astrological cycles as well. So, a few cards would be... These ones are stunning. I will say that I don't think I'd have used them as much as I have if I hadn't have put them on the desk right in front of me, but that could be a tip if you do have a deck that you don't use that much. Put it right in front of you in a really obvious place and you are far more likely to use them. I did, however, end up getting some really accurate readings. I would do single draws, and when I didn't listen to the cards, I would get the same card day after day after day for weeks. And then when I did listen to the cards, all of a sudden I never got that card again. So I think that's really interesting. It is a sign that you're starting to build that relationship with the cards, especially if they're trying to get a point across and you are completely ignoring them. So what I might do is I might switch out these cards for maybe the Oracle of the Witch or the Green Witch Oracle, and then see if I actually still use these cards as much as I did, or if it's just because they were right in front of me. Next up, we have a brand new deck, which is really surprising for it to be as high up in this list as it is, and it is the Forest of Enchantment Tarot. If you saw one of my most recent videos of all of the items that I bought from Glastonbury and Cornwall, you will have seen this deck in that video, and wow, is it absolutely stunning. It is a gorgeous deck to work with, beautiful, beautiful energy, and it is already high up, basically almost in the top 10, simply because of how good the readings are. It is big though, that is my only problem. This deck is huge, the box anyway. Inside is a full-size, full-colour guidebook, like fully full-size, full-colour. These are the tarot cards. They are bananas, they're absolutely beautiful. I've put them in this bag. This bag didn't come with it, unfortunately, but the cards are just stunning. They're absolutely beautiful. Let's go for this one, this one, this one. I want a frog. I'm going for a froggy because it's cute. Okay. Like, look at the little froggy. Isn't it so cute? It might actually be a toad. Thinking about it, I think it's probably a toad. Either way, it's cute. The artwork for me is really what sells this deck. I really enjoy this highly natural, very green, very rich, very organic artwork. It's one of my two favorite styles. I swing between that very stark black on white kind of artwork to very beautiful, whimsical, watercolory artwork. And this really hits the spot for me. I think one of my favorite cards in the entire deck is this one. It's just absolutely stunning. All in all, really beautiful deck. I will be interested to see how well it stays in this list the more I use it. Will it go up in this list? Will it come down? I'm not sure, we're gonna have to see. But the fact that it made it so high in this list almost instantaneously shows that I must have a real enjoyment for it, especially the artwork. It's the artwork that sells it for me. It is just so evocative and something that I really connect with, which massively helps. Moving into the top 10, now we're getting into the real big hitters of my tarot and oracle decks. In the number 10 spot, we actually have a spell deck. This is the Making Magic Oracle, and it is a deck that I will reach for every single time I do spell work and ritual on my altar space, especially if a candle is going to be burning for longer periods of time. I will always, pretty much always, get this deck out. It is very specifically a spell deck. Inside there is a small guidebook which covers all of the different sigils and their meanings, and then the cards themselves are circular, which you'd think I wouldn't like based off earlier decks, but because these are very specifically spell cards, I don't have the same issue with shuffling. I won't use these for doing any kind of readings. I will simply draw one out that I need for a particular working. I will cleanse it, charge it, place it on my altar, write a petition, charge it, place it on top, and then I will place a plate, dish, or tray, something that I'm burning the candles on top of that, and then the candles will go on top of that. And I will use that as almost like a sandwiching of intentions and energy that I will add into my spells and rituals. So these cards are really beautiful. They are all gold on black. And I find that more often than not, I will reach for these for spells and rituals just by default. And I feel lost when I don't know where the deck is, when I've misplaced it, or when I've simply not chosen to use anything in it. I do feel that there is a difference. So for me, these will probably be worked with for a long time to come. And actually, my box is kind of starting to fade, like up here. All of this gold is gone because I will just pull it in and out of the drawer that it's in so often that I'm just starting to wear away all of the gold exterior. Number 9 on the list is the Illuminated Tarot. Now, I got this last year, and while it hasn't been in my collection for that long, the readings have been so powerful. I've really enjoyed working with them that they have to be in this list. They are an unusual style of deck. They aren't tarot as we know it. They aren't necessarily based entirely off any one system. They're more akin to a playing card deck that has become mixed up with a Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. It's a strange concoction. So you have a really, really little guidebook inside, and then you get to the cards, which are textured. Can you hear this? They are textured almost like the 3D tarot, but they're not. It's just this strange surface texture. The cards are considerably bigger than you would find in, say, a standard Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and the artwork is really unusual. But despite the strangeness of the images, I do find them to be really evocative. I do find that I get really crazy accurate readings from them. The first reading I ever did was in the car on the way back from buying them. And from that moment on, they've all been really accurate. So despite it being a fairly recent edition, I've had so many readings be completely accurate from this deck that I will keep reaching for it. Next up, we have the Forest Fae. This is such a cute deck. You'll have seen it on a lot of my altars. I reach for it all the time. It has just such lovely energy. So as you open it up, it opens top top way like that. You have a little bit of information in the top, and then you've got the cards. The cards are really cute, really small, and they have beautiful artwork on them. I use these both for single card readings. I will also use them for my altar spaces, as well as for meditations and focal points. They are super duper easy to shuffle, which is great. They slide over one another super easy, so I will come back to them time and time again. If there's a deck that I cannot shuffle, it's difficult, it's clunky, it's big, it's awkward, I will prioritize other decks, which is why some of my decks end up unused. So a few of the cards, they all have an image and then a little bit of information or writing on them. I just think these are so beautiful. If I can pull out my favorite is this one. It is the lovely Fae on the box, and it is the Autumn Fae. These cards have just the most amazing energy from the minute I got them. I think these were stocked on my website. I think I'm sold out at the minute though, but these were stocked on the website, and I had one of my stock because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was just so drawn to them, and I have not stopped using them since. I will put them on any altar I have the chance to put them on because they just have the most beautiful, wholesome energy. So these are well deserved to be in the top 10. Up next, we have probably my favorite deck of Oracle cards I've ever owned, and that is the Work Your Light Oracle. These are beloved. I have used these so often. Just like the others, they have a guidebook inside, which looks like this. The cards are very light, very floaty. I use them a lot for additions to tarot readings. They are just beautiful. I genuinely can't say anything else about them besides the fact that they are just stunning. I absolutely love the artist who does all of these. I believe it is Danielle Knoll who does all the artwork, and it's Rebecca Campbell who creates all of the information for the decks. They are just so lovely. I love the energy. You wouldn't think that I would like them because I'm not a pink, cutesy kind of person, you might have noticed with how I dress, but these just have the most amazing energy, and I have used them so often. Like, if I think that I've used the Moonology a lot, this is by far the most used Oracle deck in my collection for readings, and so it had to be in the top 10, and honestly it's still probably my most used Oracle deck for more complex readings, not just single draws. I'll do 3 card readings, 5 card readings. For me, it has a bit more versatility than some of the other Oracle decks. Next up, we have my one and only Lenormand deck. This is the old style Lenormand, and it is absolutely beautiful. It is really small, easy to carry, easy to pack. It's one of the reasons why I like it so much, but also it has phenomenal readings. Inside, there is a tiny guidebook, which I have found I have not needed to use that often. I just find that the cards and the imagery is really easy for me to translate into my own life. It's easy for me to figure out the symbolism and the meaning, and because of that, I get really effective readings. If out of all of this, I could only take one deck traveling with me, it would hands down be this one. It is small, it is compact, you can do single card readings, multiple card readings, entire spreads, you can read for yourself and for other people, which some of the decks later on in this video won't do. So for me, this one is incredibly versatile. These are fairly new to my collection. I'd looked at a lot of Lenormand artwork and I just hadn't vibed with any until I saw these. So these have really quickly moved straight up into the top 10 because they are just so good for me personally. And I'd love to know other people's experiences with Lenormand cards. Did you find that you connected with them really easily? Did you find it was more difficult than tarot? I'd love to know. I've always found tarot to be good when it's good, but bad when it's not good. Whereas with Lenormand, I instantly found them really easy to read. It was just kind of a click in place moment. And I'm curious to see if anyone else has had that experience. This is actually a really difficult decision. I've got to change at the last minute. I've got to change it up. I thought this deck could be a lot higher in this. In at number 4 and number 5 is actually the same deck in slightly different forms. I was expecting this to be a lot higher than it ended up being, but when I really think about it, when was the last time that I used this deck frequently? the answer is about 10 years ago. So these are in at number 4 and number 5. So number 5 is the Wild Unknown Mini, and in at number 4 is the Wild Unknown Big, the original one. So both of these are by Kim Kranz. This one is in my own bag. It doesn't come in this bag. It probably came in a big box once upon a time, but I've completely lost the box. So I actually have like a little, this is how often I used to read this deck. I have a little oracle divination cloth in here. It looks like a handkerchief, but it is an altar cloth that I would lay down out and about for doing my tarot readings. That's how often I used to use this deck. I have its own little cloth in here. And inside you had the box of the tarot cards, and you also had the tarot guidebook. This was by far my holy grail tarot deck for a very long time. I took this with me everywhere. I was using this when I was doing group sessions. I was reading for other people. I really love this deck. Still to this day, I love it. The one problem I have with it is that it was incredibly good at reading for other people, but not so good at reading for myself. So when I was doing lots of readings for other people, I would use it a lot. But now that I don't do that, I find that I prioritize other decks over this one. But wow, I opened this up and the sentimentality just hit me. I don't even know if they do these anymore. They have this small paper guide inside. So not only did you have the book, but you have the paper guide. This was the original run of these decks. I have no idea if they are still done in the same way. And inside, it is shockingly sentimental. It kind of hurts my heart that I've put it where I have on this list. You have the deck. Rectangular, perfect size, they're great. I can hold them all. Phenomenal as a deck, absolutely phenomenal. And the cards are absolutely gorgeous. I cannot truly express my adoration for these cards. They are beyond beautiful. And it does kind of hurt that I've put it this far down the list, but I've done that because these hold so much sentimentality to me that I don't use them as much as I would use some of my other decks that I feel more comfortable replacing. Not some of them are very old, but especially my probably number 1 deck, I can replace that fairly easily if I need to, and so I'm quite happy to use it on a regular daily, weekly basis. It doesn't bother me to do reverse readings, to shuffle it in a certain way. If they get a little bit bent and dinged and, battered, I don't mind because I can replace them. These, I hold such intense sentimental connection with that I am kind of scared to use them in case I damage them. That's where I'm at. So, with that being said, I did go on to buy the pocket version when it was released. So, this came out a year or 2 ago. It's in a metal tin, and if I can open it up, you have a teeny tiny guidebook. Look at that! Tiny, tiny guidebook inside. And then you have the cards. So they are almost identical. The artwork is the same on the front. The artwork on the back, however, is different. So this is the full size. That is the mini. Slightly different artwork on the back. And then size-wise, this is the comparison. They are considerably smaller. And I got these specifically because I can shuffle them, batter them, take them with me. I'm not going to be as concerned because they are a lot more affordable than my original deck was when I first purchased it. I believe now that they have come down a lot, which is great for people who do want to utilize those cards. But I also don't want to damage mine. The issue I have with them is the same as I had with the original larger size, is that they are great for doing readings for other people. I do not find as much success reading for myself, which is what I primarily do. But just to show you an example of the cards, they are the same, but they're just going to be a different size, obviously. All of the detail, though, is still there, just in miniature. So for me, I think that the little ones are 5 and the bigger ones are number 4 because they do have more sentimentality to them. Now I've got to put all of these back in again. Oh no. And some of them were reversed and some of them weren't. Plop those in there. Plop those in there. bloop, 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 bloop. Oh, so much sentimentality. Scared of damaging. Number 3 is a deck that some of you will probably recognize if you've watched any of my altar setups that I used to do. It is the Living Altar. This is really heavy. This is probably the heaviest box of all of them, even the bigger ones. For me, I use this deck for my altar setups, for my spell work. Personally, I don't use it as an oracle deck simply because it is far too big for me to shuffle. But if you are able to, you can do that. This deck is beautiful. It's absolutely stunning, and it comes in multiple parts. So it does come with a guidebook. It is in black and white, but it has a lot of information about not only the divination and kind of oracle side of the cards, it also has information about the spell cards. So the cards themselves all come with this matte red edging. It's not glossy like the other deck we saw earlier. They have a beautiful print on the back, and then the front is a combination of art, of colour, of physical materials, herbs and items. It is absolutely stunning. The oracle cards follow the cycles of life, of aging, of time, of moon phases, of seasons, and so I will use them a lot on my altars and also in spell work and focus points for different workings that I'm doing. You'll probably have primarily seen them on my altars. Almost every single one of my altars will have one of these stunning cards on them. They are gorgeous. The reason I don't use them for divination is they're really big, bulky and hard to shuffle. If they had a smaller version, I would I definitely would use them for divination, but these are just too big for me to comfortably be able to shuffle without straining my hand. And I don't like doing the lay on the floor shuffle method that some people do. It's a perfectly valid form of shuffling. It just isn't something that I personally vibe with within my ritual and divinatory practices. So I find these really difficult to shuffle. The other half of this deck is a lot smaller, and these are the spell cards. They are spells, rituals, powerful ceremonies that have been immortalized in artwork, and each of these is for a specific intention. We can utilize these in our own spells and rituals to magnify the energy that is already present, and they are really interesting. They're not going to be for everyone. It's really, really up my street though. So some examples. They are just incredibly powerful, and it makes the deck so much more interesting to me. The minute I saw them on Kickstarter, I knew I had to get them, and I did, and I'm so happy that I did because I use them every single altar that I set up. I will take them out, I will look them over. Many a time when I'm doing a spell or ritual, if it will align with one of the spell cards or one of the oracle cards, I will utilize it as a focus point. I just find so much joy in using them, and the artwork is just right up my alley. The top two spaces were really hard fought for, and I found it so difficult to differentiate between first and second place. I love them both for different reasons, and I use them in different ways, but if only for the amount of use that one deck gets over the other. In second place, it is the Magic Manga Tarot. Now, some of you will know the story behind this deck, so I won't go into it too deeply, but very briefly, I got the deck secondhand. It had been incredibly well used before I got to it, and immediately I realized that there was actually a spirit attached to the deck. Now, the spirit is incredibly playful. Their favorite card of all of them is actually this Joker on the very front of the deck. That is a card within the deck as well. And when I do readings, it is the spirit that I am working through. I'm not just using the deck as a set of cards. It is the spirit that is offering me the answers to that reading, which is what makes working with this deck so interesting. The spirit is playful, they are also tricky, and they enjoy being brutally honest, and I can sense the agreement from here. And so this deck has always been one of, if not my favorite deck to work with. Brutally honest, yes, but also a joy to work with. Now, I have had to put the deck in this organza bag because the previous owner of this deck did not keep the external box in particularly good condition. The cards themselves are really well kept, but the box itself has been belovedly used. As we can tell, it is incredibly really battered. The spirit very much wants to be attached to these cards. There would be absolutely no love if I were to take the spirit out of the cards. The box is literally falling apart. This is a piece of the bottom that has come out. And inside there's a small guidebook. The cards themselves are in perfect condition. I have no idea what the person was doing with them before. If the box was simply in a damp, or perhaps it's fallen or has been trapped in a box, I'm not quite sure. But the cards themselves are perfect. Though I don't necessarily vibe with the artwork of the cards, the feel of them is impeccable. It is absolutely amazing. The card we just saw there, the Fool, this is the fellow that is currently residing in the deck. Or primarily they use the Fool card as their face for the deck. And it has always just been very fascinating to me. This deck has always been one of my favourites since I purchased it, because it has a very intense spirit attachment that very much enjoys being a part of the cards and the reading process. It makes reading with these cards far more interesting than any other deck that I have. But because the box itself is incredibly fragile, I don't use the cards as much as I would like, and the spirit would much rather be part of the box that they came in. So it's that balancing act of not knowing entirely what's best for the cards. So they are very much up there in my favourites, but I don't use them as much as maybe I would otherwise. And lastly, number one spot, gold position, we have a mystery tarot deck that is no longer in its original packaging, and that's because I use it so often. Now, some of you are going to recognise it instantly when I open this box. It is the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. This is arguably a deck that a lot of people forget about. Many people have decks based on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but not many people have their primary deck being the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, often because it tends to be seen as a first deck. It's affordable, it's easy to find, you can get different varieties of it in different colours and different shades, and many modern decks are based on the Rider-Waite-Smith system, and so a lot of the time it gets a little bit forgotten. People will often prioritise more modern decks, maybe with different art styles, but for me, the Rider-Waite-Smith is my favourite of all of the decks I have in my collection for everyday reading. So much so, I replaced the old box with this one that I got as a Christmas gift because I use it so often. Now, this deck is actually an altered copy, so I actually trimmed this deck. Usually it has borders around the edge. I don't like borders on decks, so I chopped them off. It does make it a lot easier for me to shuffle as well. Really easy, really effective. There's lots of reasons why I love the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, one of them being that it is affordable to get hold of. You can find many different varieties, different shades of brightness, so I just have the standard, but you can get the bright version where all the colours have been enhanced. You can get them with different backs on them, which is really useful if you do want a slightly different style. And because it's cheap and easy to replace, I don't mind doing reversal readings. I don't mind shuffling them really messily. I don't mind taking them out with me. I find it to be really liberating to have a deck that I'm not fearful of damaging. And not only that, but the readings are phenomenal. From the minute I got this deck, which actually isn't that long ago, I got this deck about 3, maybe 4 years ago now. From the minute I got the deck, the readings were impeccable. Every time, whether it's a single draw or a 12 card spread, it doesn't matter. The readings are always perfectly accurate for me, which is just phenomenal. It doesn't matter whether I'm reading for myself or for other people, they are always accurate, which is something I can't say for some of the other decks. Some decks prefer reading for me, some decks prefer reading for others. This one will do everything. And I'm not sure if it is just this particular deck, whether it is the artwork, whether it is just something I've done. The cards are incredibly powerful and they've almost developed a mind of their own. So the cards look like this, and they have been trimmed, so just bear in mind that a standard deck will have a white border around the edge. Even while I'm just showing you the cards, I get that feeling of more, show more, one more, another one. And this is something that I also get within my readings when I need to draw an archetype card, a focus card, where I need more context. The cards will actually tell me more. One more card, 2 more cards, maybe 3, draw an archetype card, put this card there. I'm almost getting guidance, not just from the cards I'm drawing, but from the card deck themselves. And I have no idea if that is this specific deck. I have no idea if it is just the amount of times I've used the deck. But not only do they give amazing readings, but they also guide me along the way just in using the cards. They're also useful because you can teach from a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, because a lot of decks are based on this system. A lot of books are based on the Rider-Waite-Smith artwork, so it's easy to find books on the subject. They're essentially the beginner tarot deck, but I've just kept using them, and I didn't get them when I was a beginner. Instead, my first deck was actually the Wild Unknown, or it was the Fairy Tarot. I forget which way round it was. I think it was the Wild Unknown, and then I got the Fairy Tarot to try a Royal Tarot deck. I just skipped the Rider-Waite-Smith entirely, and then when I circle back to it, it turns out it is my favourite deck to work with. So I'd love to know what your favourite deck to work with is. Do you like the Rider-Waite-Smith? A lot of people really don't like it. I'd love to know. But I do have 2 additional decks to add into this video that haven't been ranked for good reason. One is it's brand new. I wanted to share it with you so that you can have an idea of the kind of decks I'm looking into. And the second is one that a subscriber sent to me because they had created, and I couldn't possibly rank it because it's amazing. They put so much time and effort and love into creating this deck, and they sent me a copy and I have to share it with you. But first I need to put all of the decks back in their boxes again because this is getting kind of chaotic. The first of the 2 honourable mention decks is so new, I only just took the film off it, and it is the Celtic Spirit Oracle. Now, I've had my eye on this for months. I actually sell this one on my shop, and I took it to the last event with me, and I was just looking at it all weekend. I was like, I want one. And so by the end of the weekend, I gave in, and I got one off my own stall, which I'm allowed to do because it's my stall. And so I got hold of one of these decks, and I just fell in love with the artwork. I just think it's so beautiful. And also, you all know that I love working with trees. I love working with Ogham and tree spirits and working with the land and connecting with that. And that is all part of this deck, and it's amazing. So you have a guidebook inside, which is full colour, and then you have the cards. Now, the cards have a beautiful back on them. They are edged in matte green, which is a colour I've not seen edged on a deck before. And then you have the cards. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them. I simply wouldn't have the time, but I will go through just a few of them. For anyone who's not used to it, the symbol that's on the oak leaf is actually the Ogham symbol for oak. So it encompasses not only nature spirits, plant allies, tree spirits, tree Ogham, as well as the fae and land wights, which is really interesting. And the symbol in the center you might recognize as being the chalice well symbol, which is also somewhere I absolutely love. So that is that deck. I am so excited to use it. I couldn't rank it, obviously, because it is brand new, but I still wanted to share the kind of decks that I'm feeling more drawn to. My basic tarot decks are always going to be the same, I think, from this point onwards, unless something amazing comes out that I just cannot help but get. I think generally, though, it's the oracle decks that will change and the tarot decks will pretty much stay the same. The other deck is one that I really wanted to share, but I couldn't bring myself to rank because it just means a lot to me. It was sent to me and created by one of my subscribers, which is absolutely amazing. So if you're the one that created this and you would like to share your details and information about the deck, if people can find you on social media, please send me a message on Instagram and I will post it in the comment section because this deck is amazing. It is created based off the Game of Thrones series, and it has all been hand done. So this is one side, and then this is the other. It's amazing. I was absolutely amazed when I got this through in the post. I was stunned. The talent that my subscribers have is absolutely beyond me. Now, I am not well versed on the Game of Thrones universe. I need to watch it. I haven't. I was one of the few people that never watched it when it first came out. And so I am not entirely sure who everyone is in this deck. So I will give it a shuffle so we can get kind of an assortment of cards. But any adoring fans of Game of Thrones, I'm hoping that you will recognize some of the characters and figures within this deck. The back of the cards looks like this. And the front looks like this. I just want to keep showing you cards because I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of Game of Thrones fans out there who are kind of freaking out right now, because I would too if I was a massive fan. I'm just amazed. So thank you so much to the amazing person who sent me this deck. I cannot believe your talent. You are phenomenally gifted. This is so creative to have created a deck like this. So if you would like me to share any information about where people can find you, where people can support your art, I'm going to try and find the original letter that you sent me, because I do keep all of the letters so that if there's any information in there, I can always post it in the comment section. But obviously I don't want to share information that doesn't want to be shared. So those are all of the decks. They aren't every single deck in my collection. Some I simply don't use for tarot, oracle, or any kind of divinatory readings, but that's the bulk of them in ranked order. And I'm actually kind of surprised when I really looked at my decks how many end up sitting on a shelf, just not being used, because they aren't something that I am 100% drawn to anymore. I probably was once upon a time. When I purchased the decks, I was definitely drawn to them and I was definitely wanting to work with them. But then times change and we change as practitioners and we end up disconnecting from one deck and connecting to another. And it's quite likely that some of the earlier decks I will reconnect to again. It's just not right now. And some of them I might end up selling in the future to clear space and to give the decks a new home with someone who will love them and adore them. That's definitely an option. But for now, I'm going to try and start using some of the decks I don't use so much. Maybe bring them to the front of the cupboard so that I can actually see them and reach them more easily. But this has definitely shown me the kind of decks I like and the kind of decks that I don't. And I would love to know, as mentioned, what your favorite deck is. Is it something that I have in my own collection? Is it something completely unique to you? Maybe it's something you've created, something that's older. I would love to know. Please let us know in the comment section. If you do enjoy this video, feel free to let me know by liking it. It means a lot to me. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to post them down in the comment section. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. I know this was a massive video, so thank you so much for sticking it out to the end. If you have, feel free to put some star emojis in the comment section and I will try to heart and like as many of them as I can, because I really enjoy interacting with everyone, but especially the people who will sit through to the very end of my videos. I really want to be able to interact with you all. So with that being said, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!